If you are an athlete, you want to do everything possible to make sure you get an edge over your opponent. And we're seeing that now with athletes, right? Like the top of the line athletes, they spend a lot of money on their bodies. And that's just to help make sure their bodies recover well and help make sure they're getting the best possible nutrition just so that they can perform at the topmost level. For example, just look at LeBron James. Now, this guy is arguably the best basketball player of all time. And he spends a whopping $1.5 million on his body every single year. Now, that's just insane. But the point I'm trying to make is everything matters to an athlete because every little thing that they can improve on can go such a long way. Because when you think about it, like think about the NBA or the NFL. It is so hard to make it to these professional organizations. And people who make it are like the cream of the crop in terms of athletes. Everyone who makes it to that level is a gifted athlete. And they also work their butt off every single day. So you can imagine that every single advantage you can get over your opponent will go a long way. Now, what about just everyday, day-to-day people, right? Like I still go to the gym, I still like to work out, but I know I'm never gonna be one of those world star athletes. But still, we like to know what we can do to get better and how we can be more efficient when we work out. So more and more athletes are now turning to their breathing and focusing on their breathing and how they can make their breathing more efficient for their workout. And we even see that a lot of these athletes have breathing coaches to help them improve their performance. Now, the cool thing with breathing is this can literally be applied to anybody. You don't have to be this top of the line athlete to learn how to breathe properly. Literally anyone can start focusing on their breathing to improve their workout. So the goal with these athletes and the goal with their breathing is to breathe as efficiently as possible. Their goal is to use oxygen as efficiently as they can, but also not relying as much on their breathing muscles so that they can rely on their other muscles more. You want to minimize the effort that it takes to breathe so that you can maximize the effort that you are playing basketball or playing football or whatever athletic sport you're doing. So this is cool, right? Because a lot of research is now coming out and it's supporting this. It's supporting breathing through your nose and why this can be a lot more efficient for you versus breathing through your mouth. Now, let's go over your nose a little bit. So what are the benefits of breathing through your nose versus breathing through your mouth? Well, your nose actually has a lot of built-in features that make your breathing a lot better versus your mouth. Your mouth doesn't have any of these cool features. So your nose has these hairs. Now, those hairs are those super annoying things that look super ugly, but those hairs can filter out a lot of particles, a lot of dust, and it can make that air a lot cleaner. So imagine if you were an athlete and you're going for a run, and now you're running through all this dirt. Well, the last thing you want is that dirt to end up in your lungs. Well, if you're breathing through your mouth, that's exactly what that dirt is doing. Versus when you breathe through your mouth, now you have a much better chance of filtering out all that air. Now, not only that, your nose can also filter out 98 to 99% of viruses and bacteria. So now you're much less likely to get sick when you are breathing through your nose. And if you want to know something funny, actually, people who are long distance runners are way more likely to have dental problems than people who aren't. And you might think that's crazy because if you're a runner, well, you're bound to be healthier, right? Because you're always working out. Well, a lot of these long distance runners are always breathing through their mouth. And when you breathe through your mouth, you're drying up all that saliva in your mouth. Your mouth is going to be super dry. And your saliva is basically this bodyguard to protect your teeth. And if you have no saliva, you are way more likely to have cavities, way more likely to have gum disease because the saliva is not in contact with your teeth and your gums. And without this saliva, you don't have any of these antibacterial properties that are in your saliva. You don't have these nutrients that your saliva is carrying, and you're not able to wash away any leftover food or leftover plaque or leftover bacteria that are in your mouth. But not only that, if you are a runner, you're more likely to get sick. Actually, there's a study that says marathon runners are 6 times more likely than the average person to get the cold right after they run a race. I know, that's crazy, right? Like, you wouldn't think that's possible because if you are a marathon runner, you are in tip-top shape and your immune system has to be in tip-top shape as well. Well, a lot of these marathon runners are mouth breathers. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are a mouth breather, you can still be a great athlete because there's no way you can run a marathon and not be considered a good athlete. But just because you are a great athlete, it doesn't make you immune to these common diseases that us regular folk get. So not only can breathing through your nose prevent you from getting sick, And not only does it filter out the air that goes into your lungs, it can also improve the way that oxygen is absorbed in your body. So when you're breathing through your nose, one thing your body also does is it produces nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is this molecule, and this molecule has two functions. It's both an antibacterial and it's a vasodilator. So an antibacterial is basically something that fights off bacteria. And now when you're breathing through your nose and you're getting this nitric oxide, it's again helping prevent you from getting sick, but also since it's a vasodilator, it's expanding those vessels that are in your lungs and it's improving the way that gas can be exchanged. That means it's improving the way that your oxygen can be absorbed and it's making it more efficient. And not only that, when you have these open vessels, there's less resistance for your oxygen to get absorbed. But also, if you are a nose breather, it's going to promote you to breathe a lot slower because your nose holes are a lot smaller than that big mouth hole of yours. So because of that, air is going to be coming in and coming out a lot slower. Now, why is that better? Well, when you're doing these slower breaths, you're allowing your lungs to get fully expanded. You're using your lungs' full capacity. Now, one, that alone is going to make it a lot more efficient to breathe that way. But also, when you're using your lungs' full capacity, that's going to keep you a lot more calm and a lot less stressed out. So if you remember from biology class, your sympathetic nervous system is your body's fight or flight response. And if you're breathing with just the upper half of your chest, which is what you're doing when you're breathing through your mouth, you're taking these shallow breaths and you're only using the upper half of your chest, your body's going to be in this fight or flight mode pretty much all the time. Now, if you're using your lungs' full capacity and you're also engaging the lower half of your lungs, that's going to put your body in the parasympathetic mode, and that is your body's rest and relax response. Now, you might be wondering like, hey, if I'm working out or if I'm going for a run, shouldn't I be in this fight or flight mode? So if you look at guys like Israel Adesanya or Roger Federer, both of these guys are world-class athletes, and they are actually at the top level of what they do. Israel Adesanya is a UFC middleweight champion of the world at the time of this video, and Roger Federer is regarded as one of the top tennis players of all time. Both of these guys have something in common. Actually, if you look at one of Israel Adesanya's interviews that were done in one of his most recent fights, I find it pretty interesting. He said, look at me at the end of the first round and look at my opponent. You'll see that I am breathing through my nose, my mouth is closed, and he will be breathing through his mouth. That's one of the biggest differences he said that you will see. He ended up winning that fight and keeping his title, but you can see that these athletes are now incorporating this nasal breathing into their own world. And when you look at them when they're performing at this high level, like think about the UFC, and you're fighting against someone. If that's not fight or flight, I don't know what is. But if you look at Israel Adesanya during his fights, he looks so calm and composed during all of his fights. And another thing that these top athletes have in common with the way that they breathe is they use their diaphragm. So this is a way that you should be breathing pretty much all the time. You should be engaging your diaphragm. Now your diaphragm basically rests right underneath your lungs. And when you engage your diaphragm, it helps spread the air throughout your lungs and it helps make your breathing way more efficient, but it also helps make sure that you're using your lungs full capacity when you're breathing. And it helps make sure that the air is getting all the way into the bottom of your lungs as well. So how do you make sure you're using your diaphragm when you're breathing? Well, when you take a big breath, check your stomach. Is your stomach sucking in or sucking out? If it's sucking in, then you're doing it wrong and you're not using your diaphragm. Every time you breathe, your belly should be sticking out. And when your belly's sticking out, that's how you know that you're engaging that diaphragm and you're using all of your lungs capacity. And actually there's some research on just using your diaphragm as well. And the research is saying that using your diaphragm to help you breathe, it can actually help you recover after a workout. And the reason is it can get rid of some of that oxidative stress that happens when you're working out. And oxidative stress is basically something that can start to damage a lot of your cells and damage a lot of your organs. But using your diaphragm to breathe after and focusing on that is a great way to recover. And I'm actually going to make another video on this going more into detail on how you can properly recover just by using your diaphragm after you work out. Okay, so you can see that breathing through your nose is definitely more efficient. It can definitely filter a lot of air. It can definitely prevent us from getting sick. And you can see that there's even success with athletes who are at the top of what they do, top in the entire world. But you might still be thinking, I'm crazy. Like there's no way I can start breathing through my mouth when I'm going for a next mile run. It's just not gonna happen. Or you might think that, hey, You know, that sounds great and all, but my nose is always congested and I always have allergies. So there's no way I can breathe through my nose. Well, if your nose is always congested or always blocked and you want to start breathing through your nose, I made another video on that and I'm putting it in the description below. So make sure you check that out. But you're right. Sometimes you really can't breathe through your nose. Like if you ever broke your nose or if you have a deviated septum, sometimes you have to get a surgery done in order to fix that before you can start breathing through your nose again. But how do you know that's even worth it? How do I even know that what I'm saying is true? Well, there is some research out there on it. So one study was looking at people who were riding a bicycle. And these people were basically pedaling at 60% of their maximum heart rate. So that's like a mild to medium level of a workout. And they were comparing people who breathe through their mouth versus people who breathe through their nose. And what they found was people who breathe through their mouth are much more likely to be in a hyperventilation mode. So this means that they were breathing way too fast. They were taking in a lot of oxygen, but they were also releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. Because if you remember correctly, when you breathe in oxygen, but when you breathe out CO2. So if you're breathing really quickly, which is what happens when you breathe through your mouth, you're taking in a lot more oxygen and you're also releasing a lot more carbon dioxide compared to a nose breather. So what is the issue that can come with this? Well, one issue is when you're releasing this much carbon dioxide, your body over time will start to adapt to a new normal level of carbon dioxide. Because normally we have this certain level of carbon dioxide, but when we're a mouth breather and we're releasing carbon dioxide a lot more quicker, our body's gonna be like, hey, it's not normal to expect this level of carbon dioxide. We're actually gonna expect this level because that's normally what we're at. And our carbon dioxide level is basically a trigger for us to start breathing. So every time we hit this point, that's when we're gonna start to breathe. And normally, if we're at this point, it'll allow our body to build up more and more carbon dioxide, and that'll mean we're gonna have these slower breaths, right? Because it'll basically take us some time to get to this point, to get to this level of carbon dioxide in our body before we can take our next breath. But now, if our new normal is a little bit lower, if it's down here, then that means that we're gonna be breathing a lot more frequently and more likely to be in this hyperventilation mode. So how does this affect just your physical performance? Well, if you are an athlete and now you're taking these quicker breaths, well, you're breathing a lot less efficiently. And you're also using a lot of these muscles that are required for breathing, and you're using those muscles more often. Now you're delegating more energy to using these muscles, but if you were a more efficient breather, you could have delegated less energy to those breathing muscles and more energy towards running. So that same study actually later on said that you can get the same result, the same mechanical result, but much more efficiently by just using your nose to breathe versus using your mouth to breathe. Now the problem is there is a catch with this. You can't just go from what you're doing now, if you're a mouth breather, to tomorrow becoming a nose breather and running and working out just using your nose and expect to see a drastic change. It's actually going to be a lot harder than that. When you're just switching from mouth breathing to nose breathing, especially when you're working out, that's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for your body to do this slower breathing, this more efficient breathing, and just using your nose right away. And this is actually based on research too, that for the first at least 2 weeks, it's going to be really hard and your performance is actually going to decline. But what they're saying is after those 2 weeks, if you continue to work on your nose breathing and you continue to do this on a regular basis, that your performance will actually increase and actually get better. So if you're watching this video and if you have a marathon tomorrow, do not change the way that you breathe. Just do whatever works best for you. But I will encourage you that if you have something coming up in the next few months, to start focusing on nasal breathing and to start incorporating this into your workouts, into your practice sessions. And if you continue to do this over time, that you'll start to see these improvements in your overall performance. And what this other article was saying, that if you are a recreational runner, and if you switch to nasal breathing and you do this for an extended period of time, over time, you will see that your performance does not get any worse. And you're also getting all those benefits of breathing through your nose. Now you might still be thinking I'm crazy. Like let's say I have to go for a sprint or something like that. There's no way I'm gonna function that well when I'm breathing through my nose. Well, you might be partially right here, because what the studies are showing is that when you're nearing your maximal effort, so if you're a cyclist and you are pedaling at your maximum heart rate level and you are basically going all out, and if you are just using your nose versus people who are just using their mouth, well, the people just using their nose tend to have a higher heart rate. So what that's saying is people who are just using their nose breathing and they're getting to these later stages of basically when they're maxing out their performance, that switching to mouth breathing might be better. And the reason is it's basically putting more stress on your body to just strictly focusing on nose breathing. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because the whole point of nose breathing is to slow down your breathing. And the whole point of nose breathing is to stay in this calm and relaxed state. But if you are going all out, like if you're going for a sprint or if you're using your maximal effort, well, at this point, most people will switch to mouth breathing. Now, what they're finding is that everyone has a different point in terms of when they switch from nose breathing to mouth breathing. And that point of when you switch can depend on a few things. One, it depends on how often you practice your nose breathing. And the other factor has to do more with your anatomy of your nose. Like if you have super small nostrils, then you're more likely to hit that point of switching to mouth breathing earlier than someone who has really big nostrils. Because if you have really big nostrils, you can take in more oxygen. But when you're doing these super intense workouts and you're getting to like 100% of your heart rate, well, it doesn't make sense as much to use your nose because at that point, you're probably going to be in need of getting oxygen really quickly. So that's probably why using your mouth has been shown to be better in this scenario. But I don't want that to discourage you from using your nose to breathe because most of the time we're going to be working out in this mild to moderate stage because it's just not possible to constantly be going out in that all-out mode. Instead, what it seems like the best thing to do is to start focusing on nasal breathing for your workouts. And again, at first, that's when it's going to be the hardest. And you may need to slow down your workout, especially in the first couple weeks, in order to keep up with this nasal breathing, in order to keep up with this slow, more controlled breath. But what you'll find over time is that you'll be able to do the same performance that you're doing now, but your breathing will be a lot more controlled. And you'll be able to keep that nasal breathing up for a lot longer. You know, when they look at people like Israel Adesanya or Roger Federer, they say that they're just superhumans, right? Because the top world-class athletes are dying. They're like breathing through their mouth and they're really struggling. Whereas these people, they're just functioning normally and they look like they're just on a stroll in the park. Well, yeah, obviously they're all world-class athletes, but that's the real difference that comes with having a breathing coach and focusing on your breathing. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked that video. And if you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel below. I will see you in the next video.